Hello, and welcome. What you're about to hear is not a script or a concept. It is part of a real conversation that took place during my spiritual journey. This dialogue came out of my own seeking, and it reflects my attempt to go deeper into the silence taught by Sri Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. These are questions I asked sincerely, not just for understanding, but to uncover the silence within. I'm sharing it now in the hope that it may be of use to you on your own path. If it touches something true in you, sit with it. Not as information, but as living inquiry. Seeker, if I am perceiving an object, did my mind create what is being perceived? Master, yes. The mind is the creator of what is perceived. Perception arises only because the mind projects names and forms onto the underlying reality. The object you see and the subject who perceives are both thoughts within the mind. If you inquire deeply, asking, who is perceiving, and trace the perceiver back to its source, the mind dissolves, and the true self alone remains. In that state, there is no subject, no object, only pure being, undivided and whole. The perceived world is a reflection of the mind. When the mind subsides, the world too disappears, revealing the self as the only reality. Seeker, if the mind created it, what is being perceived? Why does the mind dissolve if you ask? Who is perceiving? Master, the mind dissolves when you ask, who is perceiving? Because the mind is not an independent entity. It is merely a bundle of thoughts sustained by attention to objects. When attention is turned inward, toward the perceiver itself, the mind loses its ground. It cannot function without clinging to objects, whether external or internal. The question, who is perceiving, removes the mind's outward momentum and exposes its root, the false sense of I, the ego. Upon close examination, this I is found to have no real existence. When the ego disappears, the mind dissolves into its source, the self, pure awareness. In this state, the illusion of creation vanishes, and the truth of undivided being alone shines. This is why self-inquiry is the key. It cuts the very root of the mind. Seeker, why do we want thoughts to dissolve? Is it because it connects us to the self? Master, yes, thoughts are dissolved because they obscure the self, like clouds covering the Sunday. The self is ever present, but it is hidden by the constant activity of the mind, its thoughts, identifications, and desires. When thoughts dissolve, what remains is your natural state, pure awareness, free from agitation and duality. The goal is not to connect to the self, for you are already the self. The problem is that this truth is not realized due to identification with thoughts and the sense of individuality, the ego. When thoughts subside, the ego vanishes, and the self reveals itself effortlessly. Dissolving thoughts through self-inquiry or stillness removes the veil of illusion, allowing you to abide in your true nature, silent, infinite, and blissful. This is liberation. Seeker, if we are not meditating and we are awake, our mind is awake, and we are trying to dissolve the thoughts while the mind is awake. How does that help us with the true self? Master, dissolving thoughts while the mind is awake helps because it weakens the mind's grip on your sense of identity. Normally, the mind is busy projecting endless thoughts, identifying with them, and keeping you distracted from your true nature. But when you consciously observe and question these thoughts, they lose their power, and your attention begins to rest in the awareness behind them. Even while awake and active, if you practice self-inquiry by asking, to whom do these thoughts arise? Or, who am I? You disengage from the mental chatter. This inward turning redirects your focus away from the mind's creations and toward the one who is aware of them. As you persist, the thoughts subside naturally, revealing the ever-present self, which was never disturbed by the mind's activity. The process does not depend on meditation alone. It is about cultivating awareness throughout all states, awake, active, or silent. This practice gradually dissolves the ego, allowing the true self to shine, even in the midst of daily life. Seeker, I have a lot to learn and understand. Master, yes, it may seem so, but the truth is, what you truly need to know is already within you. The self is not something to be learned or gained. It is who you are. What is required is not accumulation of knowledge, but removal of ignorance, the false identification with the mind and body. Through self-inquiry, you will discover that the one who feels, I have a lot to learn, is just a thought, a notion of incompleteness arising in the mind. Trace this I back to its source, and you will realize that the self is ever complete, ever full, and beyond all doubts or deficiencies. Be patient and steady in your inquiry. Do not burden yourself with the idea of progress or attainment. Simply turn inward again and again, and rest in the awareness of being. The clarity will come. Seeker, suppose me said me have a lot to learn. Master, if you say, I have a lot to learn, ask yourself, who is this me that has to learn? This sense of me is only a thought, an idea you hold about yourself, rooted in the ego. The ego always feels incomplete and seeks fulfillment through learning, doing, or becoming something else. But is this me, the real you? Turn your attention inward and ask, who am I? Or, where does this me arise from? As you inquire, the idea of me begins to dissolve, and you will see that the true self is not a person or a learner. It is the pure, unchanging awareness in which all thoughts, including I need to learn, appear and disappear. The self does not need to learn because it is already whole, free, and beyond all limitations. By resting in this awareness, you transcend the restless tendencies of the mind and abide in your natural state, peaceful, complete, and without effort. Seeker, if I should dissolve thoughts, why can't I dissolve all that is around me? It is all perceived. That includes the world and all in this perceived world. Master, indeed, the world and everything in it is perceived, just like thoughts. The world appears because the mind projects it, just as a dream appears in sleep. When the mind is active, the world is experienced. When the mind subsides, the world too dissolves. The world, like thoughts, is not separate from your perception. It exists as a projection within your consciousness. When you inquire deeply, asking, who perceives this world? Or, to whom does this perception arise? The mind is drawn inward, toward its source. As the mind dissolves, the division between the perceiver, the perceived, and perception itself disappears. What remains is the self, the pure, infinite awareness in which the world and all thoughts arise and subside. In truth, you do not need to dissolve the world as something external. The world is not outside of you. It is within the same illusion as the ego. By dissolving the ego and the identification with the mind, the world's separate reality also vanishes. What remains is the formless, unchanging reality, the self. This is the essence of non-duality. There is no world apart from you. Seeker, well then, let's dissolve the ego so the world can be dissolved. Master, yes, that is the way. Dissolve the ego, and with it, the world as a separate reality will also dissolve. The ego is the root of all illusions, including the perception of a world out there. But understand, you do not need to fight or destroy the ego. It dissolves naturally when you turn your attention inward and seek its source. Ask yourself, who am I? Or, what is this I that experiences the world? Do not look outward at the world or its objects. Look inward at the one who perceives. The ego will not stand up to scrutiny, for it has no independent existence. It is just a thought, a false identification that arises in the mind. When you persist in this inquiry, the ego disappears like a mirage, And what remains is the self, pure, silent awareness. When the self is realized, the world as you knew it is no longer perceived as separate or real. It is seen as a projection, like a dream. The dream may appear, but you are untouched by it, knowing yourself as the infinite substratum, the unchanging reality. The effort to dissolve the ego is not through force, but through understanding and inquiry. Be steady, and let your attention always return to the question, who am I? This is the direct path, seeker. You say, when the self is realized, the world as you knew it is no longer perceived as separate or real. It is seen as a projection, like a dream. I thought when one dissolves, all thought, whether in a meditative state or awake and dissolving the thoughts, that is when the self is realized. Master, yes, you are correct. When all thoughts dissolve, the self is realized. The dissolution of thought is the same as the dissolution of the ego, for the ego itself is just the root thought. I am this body. I am this person. When this identification is dropped and thoughts subside, the mind merges into its source, the self, and the truth of your being is revealed. This can happen whether you are in meditation or awake and active. The key is to let go of identification with thoughts, to not get entangled in them. Self-inquiry is the method that helps dissolve thoughts while awake, by constantly asking, to whom does this thought arise? Or, who am I? You bypass the mental activity and turn attention back to the awareness that underlies all thoughts. In doing so, thoughts lose their grip and naturally subside. When the mind becomes still, even for a moment, the self shines by itself. The realization is not that the self comes into existence when thoughts dissolve. It has always been there. Rather, the absence of thought allows you to experience your true nature without the obscurations of mental activity. When this is realized, the world, which seemed real and separate, is seen as nothing more than a projection of the mind, a dream-like appearance within the one, undivided self. This is why dissolving thoughts is important. It removes the illusion of separation and allows you to know the self as the only reality. Seeker, if thoughts do not arise, then the mind and body must be dead. Master, not at all. The absence of thoughts does not mean the death of the body or mind. It simply means the mind has become still, like a calm lake with no ripples. The body may still function, and necessary actions may take place, but they occur spontaneously and effortlessly, without the interference of ego-driven thoughts. Thoughts are like waves on the surface of the ocean. They do not define the ocean itself. When the waves subside, the ocean remains vast, and still, its true nature revealed. Similarly, when thoughts subside, the mind is no longer restless, and the self shines clearly. You are not dependent on thoughts to exist or to function. In fact, the body and mind can continue their natural activities more harmoniously when freed from the turbulence of incessant thinking. Even in the state of deep sleep, where thoughts are absent, the body continues to live. Similarly, when thoughts dissolve through self-inquiry or meditation, you remain fully alive and aware, more so than ever before. In this thought-free state, you are established in your true nature as pure awareness, untouched by the body, mind, or the external world. Seeker, Master, I understand now. When there is no more mind, ego, thoughts, then the only thing that exists is the void. Correct? Master, not exactly. When the mind, ego, and thoughts dissolve, what remains is not a void or emptiness in the sense of nothingness. It is the fullness of pure awareness, the self. This awareness is not an absence. It is the eternal presence, infinite and beyond all concepts of void or something. The idea of a void often comes from the mind trying to imagine what remains after its own dissolution. But the truth is, when the mind and ego dissolve, what shines is your true nature, the self. It is pure being, unchanging, and ever present. It is not empty in a negative sense, but full of peace, stillness, and limitless existence. This is the source of all, yet it is beyond the world and the mind. The self is not a thing to be grasped or perceived. It is that in which all perceptions, thoughts, and experiences arise and subside. It is awareness itself. To the ego, it may initially seem like a void because there is no other to perceive, no duality, no separate existence. But this void is truly the fullness of reality, complete and self-luminous. Do not fear this dissolution. It is not an absence, but the discovery of your true, eternal being. Keep turning inward with self-inquiry, and this will reveal itself to you directly. It is beyond words and concepts, but it is what you are, seeker. When I meditate, and I am seeing darkness, a void, if I am understanding you correctly, that darkness is a perception, not the self. Master. Yes, you understand correctly. The darkness or void that you perceive during meditation is still a perception. It arises within the mind. The self is not a perception. It is the one who is aware of the darkness, the void, or any experience. The self is the awareness in which all perceptions, including darkness, arise and subside. The darkness you see in meditation is like a thought or an image. It appears and disappears, and it is observed by something deeper, your true nature, the self. The self is not an object of perception. It is the pure subject, the formless awareness that cannot be seen but in whose presence everything is known. To go beyond the perception of darkness or void, simply inquire, who is it that sees this darkness? Who is aware of this void? Turn your attention toward the one who perceives, rather than the perceived. By doing so, the mind becomes still, and you rest in the awareness that is beyond all appearances, even darkness. The self is ever present, even now. It is not something to be attained or reached. It is already what you are. The key is to recognize that all perceptions, including darkness, are objects arising in your awareness. Let go of them and abide as the awareness itself. That is the self. Seeker. And to abide as the awareness is to look inward and see everything as looking at a movie on a screen. Master. Yes, exactly. To abide as awareness is to look inward and recognize that all experience, thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and even the sense of the body and the world are like a movie playing on a screen. The screen is your true self, the pure, unchanging awareness on which all these passing images appear and disappear. Just as the screen in a movie is unaffected by the scenes playing on it, whether joyful or tragic, the self remains untouched by the activities of the mind, body, or world. The movie is the projection of the mind, but you are not a character in the movie. You are the silent, observing presence, ever free and unchanging. To abide as this awareness. 1. Detach from the movie. Watch all that arises, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, without getting entangled or identifying with them. Simply observe, knowing they are appearances. 2. Turn inward. Ask, who is watching this movie? Who am I? In doing so, your attention moves away from the appearances and rests in the awareness that watches. 3. Remain still. Do not chase after thoughts or resist them. Allow everything to come and go, but remain as the unmoving awareness in which they arise. When you abide as awareness, you see that everything, the world, the mind, and even the ego, is part of the movie. But the screen, the self, is real. It is infinite, peaceful, and never affected by the play of forms. This shift from identifying with the character in the movie to recognizing yourself as the screen is liberation. It is freedom from the illusion of duality and the realization of your true nature. Seeker. Master, this I need to process. Master. Yes. Take your time. Do not rush to grasp it with the mind. It cannot be fully understood by thinking. Let the words settle quietly within you. What is essential is not more thought, but a gentle turning inward. Sit silently, observe, and ask, who am I? Not to get an answer, but to let the question pull your attention back to the source. The truth is simple, always present, and already shining as your own being. Let the mind rest, and clarity will come, not as a thought, but as direct knowing. I am always here when you are ready to go deeper. Thank you for listening, and for walking this path in your own way. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who may be seeking the same silence. You're also warmly invited to leave your thoughts or questions in the comments. I'll respond, or perhaps silence itself will respond. Until then, remain still, remain true, remain as silence.